to our fourth discussion. Welcome to our fourth discussion, and I'm the discussion director, so we'll start with the summary.
Well, chapters 23 and 25.
Okay, so we start out, this is after Amir gets beaten up by Asif and then leaves the house with Sorab. And in the chapter, he's in the hospital, he's kind of like flashing in and out of being conscious, or like whether he's or a dream. And he remembers, he sees like a face that he recognizes, he sees like what turns out to be like doctors. And when he wakes up, he sees like Farid and Sorab, and he discovers that he is in Peshawar, in a hospital. He also discovers that Rahim Khan has disappeared, and he's left a note for him, which is in the note, Rahim Khan kind of talks about how Baba couldn't really love Hassan in like a genuine way, like really love him openly as a son, whereas like he felt a lot of remorse, so he talks about how a lot of good came out of this remorse, and that like example is the orphanage, but also how he kind of took out his guilt on Amir. So then Rahim Khan leaves Amir some money for his expenses, and essentially they discover that Farid tells Amir that the American couple that was supposed to adopt or like send Sorab to an orphanage, they don't exist at least in Afghanistan. So discovering this, Amir leaves for Islamabad and takes Sorab with him. And when they just go to a hotel, and while in the hotel, when he wakes up the next morning, Amir discovers that Sorab has disappeared, and he recalls that Sorab was interested in one of the local mosques in the area, and he goes to that mosque and discovers that Sorab is there, and then Sorab kind of talks about how he feels dirty because of all the things that the Taliban men did to him. And he kind of asks Amir if God will send him to hell for kind of like shooting Asif in the eye. So Amir says no, like that. He tells him that's a very good thing, and they end up like going back to the hotel. And he also asks Sorab whether he wants to go to America with him, go back, essentially adopts him. 1 week later, Sorab essentially just asks about San Francisco, which is where Amir lives, and kind of expresses worry over whether Amir and his wife will get bored of him or just not care about him after a little while. He also tells Amir that he doesn't want to go to an orphanage, he doesn't want to go back. And so Amir goes to an American embassy and to just talk about how to adopt Sorab, and he's told that it's essentially almost impossible because Sorab doesn't have a birth certificate, his parents don't have death certificates, things like that. He does, however, get recommended to someone called Omar Faisal, who is essentially an adoption attorney, to help him figure out how to go about it. When he meets Omar Faisal, he's told that if he sends Sorab to an orphanage, he can then just go through the regular route of adopting him and do it that way. But he says it might take 2 years max or so. So Sorab, is told this by Amir, and he doesn't take it very well, obviously, and kind of cries himself to sleep. Amir then calls his wife Soraya, and they're talking, and she tells him that there are ways to get Sorab into America without sending him to an orphanage, since she has a friend who's kind of involved in these sort of things. And Amir goes to tell Sorab and discovers that he has slit his wrists and he is sitting, essentially bleeding in the bathtub. So that was essentially a suicide attempt, and Amir takes him to the hospital where he is essentially treat him, try to save his life. And he prays for the first time in 15 years, and is essentially he just prays for as long as Sorab is in being treated. And then when the doctor tells him that Sorab is okay and he's stable, so that Sorab is in the hospital, and Amir kind of tries to talk to him, tries to read him, but Sorab doesn't really say anything. And then Sorab eventually tells him that he wants his old life back. He wants his mother and his father and Rahim Khan and everything, and that he wishes that Amir had left him in the water in the bathtub, essentially to die. So Amir doesn't end up bringing him back to America and adopting him, but Sorab doesn't speak, essentially, since he told Amir that he wants his old life back. He's essentially mute and doesn't talk. Soraya and Amir try to connect with him, but they kind of fail. And it's only maybe a year afterwards where there's a kite fighting tournament or whatever going on, where Amir buys a kite and flies it with Sorab, and when he's got the last kite, and Sorab finally smiles a little bit, and Amir runs the kite and essentially says 1,000 times over for you, my friend. That's basically the end.
Yep, so I got some vocabulary words from this section. My first one I chose was Alhamdulillah, which means thanks to God, which Farid said after he checked up on him after he faded out in the hospital. He said, beaming, no more talking nonsense after that. So it kind of shows that they were glad he was alive, thanking God for it, and that once after that, it wasn't no more just fun and games. It was serious what they had to do. My second word was it was sin with impunity. So this is what Amir felt, because he and Baba were the rich people in Afghanistan. So they felt because Baba, what he did to Ali's wife, and Amir, what he did to Hassan, because they were rich, they could get away with it. And that's one of the things he said he felt bad about, because if it was someone else, they would have got punished, but because they were rich, they were only up to guilt, but they didn't face any punishment from the other people, because they would never know about it. The next one is tashwish, which is nervousness, and this is what Soraya was saying after he called back for the first time. And it kind of just shows the relationship, how he was in Afghanistan for way longer than expected. It was more serious and a lot of stuff happened, and Soraya was not expecting it to take that long. And the next one is Qaum, Qaom, which means family member, and this is what they were talking about Sorab in relation to Amir. He wasn't just saying that they were family, actually they were family, but it took a while for other people to figure out. And my last word is Zendagi Migzara, which means life goes on. And it was said from one of the Afghani people in the United States, or in general, how Afghanis just say, this life just goes on, stuff happens, it can end badly, it could be fine, but it's kind of the way they have their life. They're just it just happens. They can't really control much about it.
Okay.
So, discussion questions, right?
Yeah, I have. So, first one is, describe how Amir connects with Sorab. How does Sorab react to his freedom and, essentially go through, process the events that he has experienced?
Well, the only time that Sorab really feels connected with Amir is when he's talking about Hassan. The first time, I think, was when he showed him the picture of Hassan, the Polaroid photo. That was the first time he really connected with Sorab. And the second time was kite fighting, which is also reference back to Hassan and riding the kite for him. So it was kind of related to his father. So maybe it's because it reminds him of his old way of life. So that's the only thing that really he can really connect with.
Actually, I think there was another instance in between those two that you mentioned. They were playing cards in the hospital, right?
Oh, they were
Yeah,
playing
they
for
were
a long
playing
time.
cards in the hospital.
They played for like the whole day.
Yeah.
Right, they were playing another game that he played a lot with Hassan, right?
Yeah.
So it's just he wants his old life back, and he says that. He even says that to Amir. He says, "I want my old life back." But in terms of trying to connect with Amir, like I don't know, he doesn't really connect.
It's like a one-way
really depressed.
relationship, kind of. Like, it's
Yeah.
all Amir, and then Sohrab is still in the process of kind of developing that trust in him, which he obviously lacks because he's had so much happen to him.
Yeah, even when they go back to America, like Amir buys everything for him that he might want. He wants to, enroll him in like whatever he wants to, soccer or something, and he wants him to get involved. But Sohrab won't even talk, so they won't really connect. They didn't really connect too much, and Sohrab was still haunted by his past.
Well, at the end of the last chapter, after he ran the kite, it kind of gave a sense that like things were changing because Amir said this was something happened or some change was present in Sohrab. Like he could see because he smiled the first time that maybe there's a chance that they could have a good relationship.
And the book cuts off.
And that was the end.
But we don't really know because like the kite could just be because he was thinking of Hassan.
Could be a one-time thing.
Could be a one-time thing because he's thinking of Hassan, but then once he's not thinking of Hassan anymore, just thinking of Amir, it goes away. But I think the ending of the book was made the reader like be led to believe that it was going to get better and that it was just going to go up and up from there.
So my next question is, how does Amir's determination to adopt Sohrab reflect a change in his character?
I guess at the beginning, or just at the end, before he went back from Rahim Khan's letter, he was still like really cowardly. And even while he was there, it took a lot of convincing from Rahim Khan, or not even convincing, guilt tripping, I would say, for Rahim Khan to actually like go and pick up Sohrab, right? So I guess at the end, he shows a lot more determination and self-purpose, I would say. Like, he actually drives himself to do these things for Sohrab instead of just, like, being his old laid-back personality who's only concerned with, like, his own fears, wants to be comfortable in his own life. He's, like, actively making changes to himself to better, I guess, suit himself to Sohrab.
Okay, my next question is, why does Rahim Khan leave Peshawar and lie about the American couple who are supposed to adopt Sohrab?
Well, I think he has to say the American couple because if he says like you can go get this kid and then you have to like adopt him and this is going to change your life forever, like Amir's probably not going to do it.
Take the next one.
It was already way too much for Amir just to go pick him up.
Just to go pick him up.
I'm just giving you money.
But to say pick him up and keep him for the rest of your life, like that'd be way too much. So he had to make out. I think it's a scene that he made up this couple. They don't actually exist, but just to get Amir to go and get Sanabar, and then I think he goes. He leaves just because he is dying, and I think he just wants to go be alone. And he's a very devout Muslim. So I think he just wants to go be alone, somewhere where he can pray and just be alone for his death.
Yeah. Okay. So explain Sohrab's silence towards Soraya and Amir. How is this connected to his hate of, going back to the orphanage?
Well, obviously he doesn't want to go back to an orphanage, right? He himself says that he's experienced things there that he doesn't want to experience again, which I would expect to be like hunger, poverty, coldness, rape, the selling,
just abuse,
molestation, stuff like that. Could you repeat the question?
Explain Sohrab's silence towards Soraya and Amir. That's the first
Oh yeah,
one.
and then like Amir, I talk about this later in my passages anyways, but Amir makes a promise to Sohrab that he won't ever go back to an orphanage again, and he like sells him, like hugs him and whatnot, and then here he is like not too much later telling him, oh, you're going back to an orphanage, that's how we can adopt you, and then Sohrab's like, no.
Okay. So, what do you think of the ending?
I think it's it's not like you can't really say like it's like this ultra happy ending where it's just unicorns and rainbows and like everything just works out, because you can see like the damage on Sohrab is like so deep that he's basically mute and he just doesn't talk because he's so kind of untrusting and he's so damaged emotionally and also physically. But I think it is a happy ending in the sense that Amir, you can see his character has really changed just going through that decision to like adopt Sohrab, and then also the way that he's acting now. He's kind of opened up and he's released a lot of that pent up like guilt and all those, and I feel like Sohrab can really be kind of like a point of redemption for him. And as he continues to develop him and kind of treat him well and treat him like he should have treated Hassan, I think that is a kind of like a hopeful ending, I guess. It's not like a happy ending because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if Sohrab is going to like just have a really negative output, but I think for Amir, in the sense, it's very hopeful for him. I think that's good.
I think the story closed finally when Amir, I think, was 100%, or not maybe 100%, but like he was over everything that he's done to Hassan and everyone else. That like even at the very end, during the celebration party, or when he had people over at his house for dinner, he just straight out told them the story of Baba and how Hassan was actually his brother. He just told them straight out, and he didn't even care about what the other people would think. So I think he finally got over like his past, and he didn't have to go back to like the way he used to live, like in just guilt forever. But he's fine now.
Yeah, I think there hadn't been a lot of like hope throughout most of the book. It had been pretty bad. But then at the end, like the last word is like, I ran. Amir's running after the kite, and there's hope for him. And I think it's basically just hope. Finally, there's actually hope that things will get better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it.
It'd be great to know that's it. Alright, Passage Master. So I have to connect 5 special sections that I found important. And then apply for reading. I'll read them out loud, because I know what they are. First passage is... Wait, let me turn on my screen brightness. It's a bit dim right now. Okay. First passage is on page 266, paragraphs 1 to 6. The plan was this: leave the hospital, get the money from the safe deposit box, and pay my medical bills. Drive to the orphanage and drop Sohrab off with John and Betty Caldwell. Then get a ride to Islamabad and change travel plans. Give myself a few more days to get better. Fly home. This was the plan anyway, until Farad and Sohrab arrived that morning. Your friends, this John and Betty Caldwell, they aren't in Peshawar, Farad said. It had taken me 10 minutes just to slip into my Purant Humban. My chest, where they cut me to insert the chest tube, hurt when I raised my arm, and my stomach throbbed every time I leaned over. I was drawing ragged breaths, just from the effort of packing a few of my belongings into a brown paper bag. But I'd managed to get ready and was sitting on the edge of the bed when Farad came in with the news. Sohrab sat on the bed next to me. Where did they go, I asked. Farad shook his head. You don't understand. Because Rahim Khan said. I went to the U.S. consulate, Farad said. Pick up my bag. There never was a John and Betty Caldwell in Peshawar. According to the people at the consulate, they never existed. Not here in Peshawar anyhow. My bad, not 1 to 6, 1 to 8. Just counted again. Here goes 1 to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, next to me, Sohrab was flipping through the pages of the old National Geographic. So, my reason for picking this was, I thought it was a pretty impactful scene. Where Amir discovers that Rahim Khan had lied to him about the American couple, and that he has to now care for Sohrab. Like, all the emotions going through within him were probably... It was probably just a big mess inside him, because he just discovers that it was all a lie from Rahim Khan. That it was a lie from the beginning. Rahim Khan always just wanted Amir to take care of Sohrab after finding him again. So I think it was just like a moment of burden for him, where everything just kind of piled onto him all at once. Thoughts? No thoughts?
Nice passage.
Okay. Okay. Next one is page 277. Nah, the entire page. The entire page. Because this is the... I'll read out loud. Do you think father is disappointed in me? I know he's not, I said. You saved my life in Kabul. I know he is very proud of you for that. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. It burst the bubble of spittle that had formed on his lips. He buried his face in his hands and wept a long time before he spoke again. I miss father and mother too, he croaked. And I miss Sasa and Rahim Khan's key. But sometimes I'm glad they're not here there anymore. Why? I touched his arm. He drew back. Because he said, gasping and hitching between sobs, because I don't want them to see me. I'm so dirty. He sucked in his breath and let out a long, wheezy cry. I'm so dirty and full of sin. You're not dirty, Sorab, I said. Those men, you're not dirty at all. They did things. The bad man and the other two, they did things to me. You're not dirty and you're not full of sin. I touched his arm again and he drew away. I reached again gently and pulled him to me. I won't hurt you, I whispered. I promise. He resisted a little, slackened. He let me draw to him and rested his head on my chest. His little body convulsed in my arms with each sob. What do you think of that?
It kind of reminded me of Hassan, how he never fought back. And the one time that Sorab fought back, he felt really guilty for what he did. Even though in Amir's mind it was 100% justified. It's kind of like their example of just not fighting back and always being a servant to even people who are abusing him, still serving him.
Yeah, it's almost like their weakness, but they can't fight back.
My reason for picking this one was because in the scene, Sorab asks Amir if he was dirty because of all the things that the men have done to him. And Amir comforts him and assures him that he isn't. I think it's a really strong connecting scene between the two characters because this is one of the first scenes in which they actually have a deeper conversation with each other. And yeah, I thought that was pretty significant for their relationship or where it will go anyways. Next passage is page 283, paragraphs 1 to 4. 283. Paragraphs 1 to 4. Okay. I'll read out loud. I struggled out of the bed and crossed the space between us. I sat beside him. I won't ever get tired of you, Soraya, I said. Not ever. That's a promise. You're my nephew, remember? And Soraya, Jan, she's a very kind woman. Trust me, she's going to love you. I promise that too. I chanced something. Reached down and took his hand. He tightened up a little but let me hold it. I don't want to go to another orphanage, he said. I won't ever let that happen. I promise you that. I cupped his hand in both of mine. Come home with me. His tears were soaking through the pillow. He hadn't said anything for a long time. Then his hand squeezed mine and back. And he nodded. My reason for picking this one was because in this scene, Amir tells Sorab that he will never bring him back to another orphanage and that he'll take care of him from that point on. Never to let him go. I thought it was really significant because in here, it is the promise that Amir gives, which he later tells them that he has to go to another orphanage in order to prepare for the adoption process.
Yeah, that kind of...
Which also leads to Sorab's attempt at suicide, because he doesn't want to do so. More on that later. But any thoughts on that? Don't give promises lightly.
Maybe not the best idea to tell Sorab that he should go to an orphanage.
Probably not the best to promise
So many
shattered kid anything, and then later on shatter that promise.
Yeah.
I mean, he almost died from that, right? Like, just
Yeah.
off of that, he literally almost died from that.
I think that he's shown a promise, but I think that was like okay. I think how he treated he was so desperate to get him to America that he would just do anything.
Yeah.
And then he seemed to once he was trying to get him to America, it seemed like he didn't make rational decisions anymore.
Yeah.
He would just listen to
Yeah.
someone was like, "Oh, you should do this." Like put him in an orphanage for 2 years, and he's like, "Okay," didn't think about it at all, just did it.
This is before the whole ambassador
Yeah,
embassy thing.
yeah.
So I think it was just in that moment, but then overall in the long term,
Later.
I don't think it was a good
He
decision.
didn't think it through.
In the
He just
moment,
wanted it to
it
happen.
was good as a thing of comfort, but overall, it was
Later, no.
very dangerous.
I still don't think it's good, just because there's so much you could
Good intentions, wrong
Good
action.
intentions, wrong,
Yeah.
bad, unfortunate timing.
wrong
Didn't
words.
think it through.
Okay, next section is page 291, paragraph 6 to 12, and goes on to page 292, paragraphs 1 to 11. Quite long, but important, I think. 6 to 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Wait. Excuse me. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I got up. Come on, Sorab, I said in Farsi. Sorab slid next to me, rested his head on my hip. I remembered the Polaroid of him and Hassan standing that same way. Can I ask you something, Mr. Andrews? Yes. Do you have children? For the first time, he blinked. Well, do you? It's a simple question. He was silent. I thought so, I said, taking Sorab's hand. They ought to put someone in your chair who knows what it's like to want a child. I turned to go. Sorab trailing me. Can I ask you a question? Andrews called. Go ahead. Have you promised this child you'll take him with you? What if I have? He shook his head. It's dangerous business, making promises to kids. He sighed and opened his desk drawer again.
That foreshadowing.
You mean to pursue this, he said, rummaging through papers. I mean to pursue this. He produced a business card. Then I advise you to get a good immigration lawyer. Omar Faisal works here in Islamabad. You can tell him I sent you. I took the card from him. Thanks, I muttered. Good luck, he said. As we exited the room, I glanced over my shoulder. Andrews was standing in a rectangle of sunlight, absently staring out into the window, his hands turning the potted tomato plants toward the sun, petting them lovingly. Take care, the secretary said as we passed her desk. Your boss could use some manners, I said. I expected her to roll her eyes, maybe nod, in that I know everybody says that kind of way. Instead, she lowered her voice. Poor Ray. He hasn't been the same since his daughter died. Very, very dark. Very dark and deep.
Okay,
So,
get
background.
The next two paragraphs, I raised an eyebrow. Suicide.
She whispered.
Foreshadowing.
So,
Yes.
I guess the background context of this one, I haven't really said that. This is at the embassy when Amir tries to ask for the visa or the immigration permit for Sohrab. And then he discovers that it's going to be a long and complicated process. So I'll get to reading. Amir is in the midst of determining how he is to adopt Sohrab and bring him to the United States, only to learn that it will be a hard task to accomplish because of the chaotic state of Afghanistan and the lack of papers. When the ambassador tells him to essentially give up, Amir questions him about his own children, and the ambassador gives him the card. Upon leaving the front desk, Amir discovers that the ambassador's daughter had committed suicide. Thoughts?
Definitely some foreshadowing.
Definitely foreshadowing.
Okay.
That's also my
Yeah.
next passage, by the way. It's just very
I think it
dark.
Yeah, it does really show how illogical his decisions are, and the way. I mean, it's both a good and a bad thing. How much he's really, really trying to adopt Sohrab. At the same time, he's not thinking
I
through.
think it's a bit rash. That could have backfired on him a lot. He could have made him mad.
Yeah.
He could have made him
Could have
very
lost
mad.
any chance to adopt Sohrab at all.
Yeah. But yeah, it is a good foreshadowing of the next passage. Page 305. Paragraphs 2 to 6. 2 to 6. Sohrab, I called, rising from my bed. I have great news. I knocked on the bathroom door. Sohrab, Sorayan just called from California. We won't have to put you in the orphanage, Sohrab. We're going to America, you and I. Did you hear me? We're going to America. I pushed the door open, stepped into the bathroom. Suddenly I was on my knees, screaming through my clenched teeth, screaming until I thought my throat would rip and my chest explode. Later, they said I was still screaming when the ambulance arrived. Wow. Significance. I think this is a very important scene within the book.
Almost the biggest screw up.
It definitely leads to the
probably much worse. Than
definitely
the
leads to the
previous
next
one.
year of his life. I mean,
Could have been much worse
Yeah.
than it was.
so significance. When Amir and Soraya are on the phone, and Amir discovers that there is a chance for a quick adoption, Amir goes to tell Sohrab, only to discover that he slit his wrist in the bathtub in an attempt to commit suicide to avoid returning to an orphanage, which then leads to a year of silence from Sohrab in the United States, which then lasts until the end of the book. So this is lots of foreshadowing from the previous passage, and I guess even things before that, when he was saying he was full of sin, will God forgive me. He's just a very shattered?
Yeah.
Broken
Broken
child. He's just a very broken person, I think. And just the fact that I kind of like how within this section, they don't tell you exactly what happened. It just tells that he opens the door and he fell down, screaming. It's later on that through some hints that you find out that he slit his wrist in the bathroom. So I think that way of writing it was also a very good way. They didn't really explain everything until later on, when they're back in the United States, and it's talked about how Sarai was avoiding looking at the pink wrists, and that's when you know that what actually happened. I think that was a really good way of writing it. I liked it. So thoughts on the event?
It just really shows how much Amir cares and how much it really impacts him, and definitely. I think it's just Sorab's reaction to loss of trust, and he can't really take any more go through any more. He can't take any more betrayal or hurt or this pain, because he's already gone through so many things, like losing his parents and then getting raped, things like that. And that's sort of like his breaking point. That's just basically.
Yeah, I think anything that reminds him of his past, he can't handle. Anything that he probably still, all the abuse he probably still thinks about it, has flashbacks to it. So anything that reminds him of that, he just wants to run from that and even kill himself to avoid that.
It was like his only last chance. He was in Amir, because he wanted to go back to America. He got betrayed by his last chance by saying you had to go back to an orphanage.
Yeah.
So like what Brian said, he couldn't handle anything else.
I feel like the problem is giving too much hope. It's like when you build up someone's hopes
You
and you shut them down. Oh my goodness, it's not good, especially if they've been so damaged.
Bad decision making there.
Okay. So
So I got
Connector.
the connector points, 5 connections to the real world. So my first point is suicide from emotional trauma, and then as well as depression, pretty much. Which Sorab, he has a lot of emotional trauma from his past, and that leads him to attempt suicide. And then he survives, but he still has a lot of depression. And even though he gets offered anything he wants, he still has depression and he won't talk or anything. And this is in today's world, there's a lot of people who have depression and a lot of people who are scarred by events earlier in their lives. Does anyone have any other comments?
Triggered.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
maybe
pretty good meme, but
there's
it's
a pattern in how his depression or his trauma started. Like someone he trusted turned away from him. Well, at least he thought so, because he thought he was sending him to an orphanage. So he thought that the only person he could trust was betraying him. So maybe other people probably have similar stories, how they trusted someone yet they got hurt by them.
Yeah, I think it's just a bunch of trust and breaking of the trust, I would say.
Yeah,
Yep.
and there's a lot of breaking of the trust in today's world. Number 2 is praying in desperation. So it's basically Amir, or praying in desperation, even if you're not too religious. Amir wasn't religious. He was, but he hadn't done anything in 15 years. He said he didn't even know the words of the prayers. But then when something bad happened, Sorab attempted suicide, then he started praying and
he never stopped praying.
I feel like that's true today. A lot of people they just don't care about the spiritual world
until it actually matters.
until something actually happens, and then they're
Just Father in heaven,
Yeah.
hallowed be thy
Hallowed
name.
be thy
Thy kingdom come. It's like those movies where the guy's about to die, and then he recites the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Why
it's
would-
actually very real.
It's just, I feel like it's just people are in their most desperate time, they're
It's
okay,
definitely
if there's a
desperation.
God, then I might as well, and then they just pray. But then
It's
when
definitely-
when they're out of it, they're
when-
oh, I don't know.
It's
Definitely
when
desperation.
something's out of their control and they really can't do anything to prevent something from happening.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes desperation for someone to realize,
Out of their control.
Yeah.
realize that
Yeah.
they need a God.
Okay, my next point is on lots of paperwork, lots of long paperwork, because Amir has to do a lot of paperwork to try and adopt him, and that's true in today's world too.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of paperwork.
In
In adopting kids,
Such
and
connections.
Jeez.
and tried to adopt kids from like foreign places.
Need I remind you, there is no right answer here. Whatever the reading connects you with is worth sharing.
Exactly. It is very true. Very true.
Yeah, I guess a lot of times paperwork is formalities. I mean, you're in Afghanistan, you're in the middle of the Taliban, up in your face, through the streets, and you're asking people for death certificates. Like, who knows how many people die a day?
Yeah.
Like, why are you
Yeah,
asking for a death certificate when they're in a state of constant war?
I
Like-
think what's hard is that like the countries that are in a bad situation or at war is like usually where the kids need to be adopted from the most, but then it's where the paperwork is like the worst.
And
And
then
there's
the
no
gov- then the
certificates or
government
anything.
Worst
can't-
adoption.
It's a quick
system.
situation. You need things to happen quick. But then
Yeah.
in these countries that you're saying the paperwork too, they're all like, no problems. Let's just handle this formally and like procedurally.
Yeah.
Okay, so last one overheated again. So let's redo that.
We're back.
We're just gonna redo that point just in case that cut off. So if we repeat, we're sorry. But if we don't repeat, good thing we did
Back
this.
to the connector.
Okay, so continuing on with my connection points.
Third point.
My next point is all the long paperwork that they have to do and that Amir has to do to try and adopt Sohrab. And this is the same today. Like, to adopt people, there's a lot of paperwork that has to get done. And, yeah, just a lot of paperwork. And if there hadn't been so much paperwork, maybe they would have got him adopted to America faster and he would never have attempted suicide. But because the process was so complicated, it was just a very confusing process.
It's kind of like the people in the West want to have everything like formalized and like step by step and process, but where it needs it the most is like all run down. It's like Afghanistan, they're not gonna have death certificates or anything. So
That sounds familiar. Yeah. So if you're in like, I guess a war-torn country, you're not gonna have pieces of paper signifying people's deaths lying around, right? Like the government's not gonna issue these death certificates. If you die, who even knows you died? Who even knows who died? Who knows how many people died? Like, it's sad to say that, but it's the truth. Like,
Yeah.
you're not even gonna keep track of who's alive.
Yeah, especially, like, most often the places where kids need to be adopted from the most is in, like, a war-torn place, but that's also the hardest to get paperwork and to get them adopted. Okay, my next point is the quote that Sohrab says, which is, "I want my old life back." And that's a connection to today, just in like, some people, they want to get their old life back, but they can't, and they have to like come to terms with the fact that they'll never have the old life back. But I do think that some people like still struggle with that today.
yeah, sometimes it takes a lot for people to move on. Like, say something happened that changed their life, they just want to get back to what it was before, but they have to realize that's not always possible to do that.
Okay, and then my last point is about cultural celebrations. So at the end, all the Afghanis in wherever they live, what city is
San
it?
Francisco.
San Francisco, or a lot of the Afghanis, they're all together and having like a festival, and there's kite running, and they're doing like traditional stuff, and like that still happens today in like many cultures. Even when they come to North America, they continue doing their like rituals or whatever. Rituals.
Celebrations.
Celebrations.
Traditions.
Festivals, traditions.
Celebrations and traditions.
Ritual.
There's celebrations and traditions, and Amir even says like they just did it. He didn't. It's not like he even felt like a need to do it. He just did it out of like civic duty. So he still felt like to be connected because of his Afghan upbringing and heritage. Those are my 5 points.
Okay.
So does anyone have any other final comments on the book?
It's a good book.
Good book.
It is a good
It
book.
was very good.
I enjoyed
It's
it.
like long
Emotional.
life story.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a normal life story.
And it's not very cliche. It's like pretty original
Yeah.
idea.
Quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Like the character is, I'd say, like the whole story is pretty relatable. I think,
Strong
and is
characters.
modern as well because of the Afghan aspect.
Yeah, and I appreciate that the author is also an Afghan.
Similar background, actually, if
Yeah.
you read the bio.
Yeah, he's also a doctor that is
A writer
that is a writer.
has 2 children.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, and he gives like a really nice perspective. So I like it.
I think it's a nice detailed book.
Yeah.
And told you things that you already knew, but in a better context from someone that actually lives there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or has lived there.
Has lived there. I think he moved to
Yeah, definitely.
America.
He's in the States.
when he moved when he was 11. No, when he was 15, I think.
Yeah, he was like some medical thing in California or
So it's
whatever.
still pretty similar. The 2 stories,
Yeah.
basically.
And he had like
But
his
not
upbringing.
autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Bye. You want to hit the button? Anyone? Top button?